Welcome into the Solo Shot Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Dom Manna. Appreciate you all tuning in here on the brand new YouTube channel. A lot of new things going on. New YouTube channel here at Solo Shot Sports on YouTube. New setup here at the ETV Community Media Center podcast station, as well as a new branding. For those of you that followed this podcast before this new era, I was doing MLB and NFL takes every Solo Shot Saturday on Anchor and Spotify. But the more I progressed down that journey, I realized that baseball is my true passion. I've always loved it. It has deep roots in American history and is such an integral part of our society. I love the game. And while many games have changed over the years, baseball is still very true to those deep roots. So wanted to continue talking about baseball, and I will be providing you with great stories and undertold things that are going on across the league as we round across the bases. And to share my love of this game's rich history, we will be throwing it back down the third base line with our throwback third base. Thank you for clicking. Please like, share with a friend. Trying to grow this community as we now have a new baseball season here in 2023. Happy opening day, baseball fans. And opening day is a beautiful thing, especially after that insane World Baseball Classic, Shohei Ohtani striking out Mike Trout for the final out in the championship game. An amazing spring training where more young stars than I can remember are making the opening day squad. Doesn't matter about service time, doesn't matter about third place finish in Rookie of the Year voting. They gain a year of arbitration back. Teams want to win, and I love to see it. I think we're having a ton of great storylines this year that will be a result of the rule changes. Yes, there were 3 big rule changes. I'm sure you've heard about them all before. The pitch clock, the bases being bigger, and my favorite, reducing the shift. I think that's going to cause a lot more ground balls through the infield. I think it's going to expose some defenders across the infield that weren't as good as they looked when they were able to move over to where the ball's likely to be hit. And I'm excited to see more offense, stolen bases, and just base hits. I mean, everyone loves the home run, don't get me wrong, but being able to put together an inning and really get after a pitcher, that takes a lot of skill, and it's really fun to watch. Every team right now, as you're listening to this on opening day, is within a game of first. Whether they won or lost, they're within a game of first. That's really exciting. But there comes a time where everybody who covers baseball has to make some decisions, put their opinion out there on what they think is going to happen. And for the 2023 playoff picture, we start in the American League East. Yes, the home of my Boston Red Sox. I am a Boston Red Sox fan to a fault, but I am not one of the ludicrous fans that will be picking his team to win the division just because they're my favorite team. The Red Sox are kind of in a transitioning year, and I think they'll have a fine season, but nothing to write home about. I actually have the Blue Jays usurping the New York Yankees in the American League East this year. It's now or never for them, in my opinion. They went from having a ton of great young talent to having a legit contender. Those guys that were bright young stars are now all-star MVP caliber level players in Bo Bichette and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. They have George Springer and a great pitching staff anchored by Alek Manoah, who was in the entry sequence that you saw, the countdown, along with Chris Bassett over from the Mets. Jose Barrios, I think, will be much better than he was when he came over from the Twins. And of course, Kevin Gausman, one of the most underrated pitchers in all of baseball. He is truly the new Kyle Hendricks, and I think he could have a similar effect on this Blue Jays squad. Going over to the AL West, the champs still reign supreme. Dusty Baker is a future Hall of Fame manager. Over 2,000 wins, a World Series title. You can't ask for more. But that team, it lost Justin Verlander. Jose Altuve is hurt because of the World Baseball Classic. They're in shambles. No, the Astros are one of the deepest rosters in Major League Baseball. I'm confident in them, and you should be too. I know a lot of people are still on the whole trash can cheating scandal. The majority of those players that were on that team are gone. It's a bunch of new faces, homegrown players that were not a part of that madness. And I think that it's going to be really exciting to see what this Astros team can do. Alex Bregman looking to bounce back. Jose Abreu, one of the best players in the American League the last decade, coming over from Chicago. They're going to be able to score runs, and that pitching staff from the rotation all the way to Ryan Presley at the back of the bullpen is going to get outs. Angels are fun. The Mariners are even more fun. But the Astros are taking the West. The AL Central, to me, was very tough because a lot of these teams are kind of in the middle. But the Cleveland Guardians should be the favorite, not just because they won last year, but because of the projection they're on. They had one of the best pitching staffs in Major League Baseball last year, as well as one of the best young cores. They had the youngest roster in the major leagues. And those guys are going to get seasoned. They're going to get better. Having guys like Shane Bieber anchoring the rotation, Emmanuel Clase, the best closer in baseball in the bullpen, and Jose Ramirez, one of the most consistent hitters in baseball. In your lineup, Terry Francona at the helm, they're going to be just fine. Taking that next step and being a legit team, bringing in Josh Bell. I really like that move, adding some power to a team that didn't hit a ton of home runs in 2022. The wild card picture is a lot more fun in the American League than the National League, in my opinion. But the Yankees are going to make the playoffs. It stinks to say it. As a Red Sox fan, I would love to see their winning streak season come to a halt. But the Yankees, despite the injuries to the rotation, despite Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton's injury history, they're going to be just fine. Anthony Volpe, the top prospect in the organization, called up to be their starting shortstop on opening day, the youngest Yankee to start on opening day since the captain, Derek Jeter. There's going to be those comparisons. But what Volpe does bring, he might not bring the leadership, the championships, the 3,000 hits, but Volpe brings an element of speed that this team was sorely missing over the years. Anthony Volpe is going to be a spark plug for that Yankees lineup. All these old sluggers that they have are going to be able to drive him in. So the Yankees are going to be just fine. The pitching staff will get healthy, and the lineup will rake. I then have the Texas Rangers as the most improved team in baseball. The Rangers, if they win on opening day, will be over 500 for the first time in 3 years. And I'm picking them to make the playoffs because they have just invested so much into great talent. Jacob deGrom, Nathan Eovaldi, Corey Seager, Marcus Semien. The list goes on and on. I think they're going to have a great season, top to bottom. This AL West, the Astros are going to take it away, but there's 3 other teams in that division that are going to make some noise. And I think that the Texas Rangers, with a Hall of Fame manager coming out of retirement, buying in to what they're building, it's going to be a great season for the Texas Rangers. And finally, America's team. Everyone rallied behind the Seattle Mariners last season. And while I think they will take a slight step back because of the improvements of the Angels and the Rangers, I still think they get into the playoffs, that last wild card spot. Julio Rodriguez is a legit superstar. He went 25-25. I wouldn't be shocked with the bigger bases and the pitch clock and everything going on. if he's a 30-30 the guy. It wouldn't shock me one bit. That pitching staff, Luis Castillo, came into his own. They have young guys, George Kirby, and everyone forgets about Robbie Ray, who won the Cy Young, signed a big contract, and then just had a good but not great year. He'll be just fine. The Seattle Mariners are going to make the playoffs once again. Not just a 20-year playoff drought, back-to-back postseason appearances. Good for you, Seattle baseball. The NL side, starting in the East, it's the Braves division to lose until I see otherwise. They have won it the last 5 years, and the Braves showed last year against the Mets at the end of the season that they're the big dogs in the division. Snitker is a great manager, and Alex Anthopoulos has done a masterful job of locking up his young core and building a true potential dynasty. I don't know if they're going to win a bunch of championships. The Braves of the 90s had a very stacked roster and only won one. But winning a second one, that's very possible with this Braves roster. Young talent top to bottom, great pitching rotation with some injured guys that I think will make great mid to late season additions. The NL West is also the Dodgers division. They've suffered some big losses, including Gavin Lux's terrible ACL tear during spring training. I was excited for him to get the opportunity to be the Dodgers' everyday shortstop and show the potential that everyone's always talked about with him. But when you have Mookie Betts and you have Freddie Freeman and you have Clayton Kershaw, those are guys that are going to keep the locker room calm and they're going to figure things out. I have all confidence in the Dodgers. They are a class act organization. Dave Roberts at the helm. They have always been a good team. I expect them to be so in 2023. And finally, the NL Central, the St. Louis Cardinals, those who followed me in the previous iteration of this podcast know that I have love for the St. Louis Cardinals because of Albert Pujols. Albert Pujols is now retired, but this team arguably has gotten better. Losing Yadier Molina and Albert Pujols will not be easy, but replacing Yadier Molina's subpar offensive numbers with Wilson Contreras, who's a legit all-star level catcher, having these young guys get another year with Tyler O'Neill, Tommy Edman, Brandon Donovan, Dylan Carlson, Lars Nootbaar, Japanese sensation, as well as top prospect Jordan Walker making the opening day roster, the Cardinals are going to take care of business in the NL Central. For the NL wildcard situation, pretty similar to last year. The Philadelphia Phillies and New York Mets, the NL East is one of the best divisions in baseball because of those three teams. The Phillies, Dave Dombrowski knows how to win championships, and he just fell short last year. What does he do? He bulks up the bullpen, bringing in Craig Kimbrell, bringing in Gregory Soto, re-signing Sir Anthony Dominguez. That bullpen is a legit juggernaut. Pairing that with Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola, they're going to be very good until Bryce Harper comes back and lifts that lineup up another level. Trey Turner had an amazing World Baseball Classic, and I expect him to help carry the load until Harper's healthy. The New York Mets, they're spending so much money that they have to basically figure it out. Again, when you have guys like Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander in the room, they're going to figure things out. I expect Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso to have pretty similar numbers to what they had in 2022. And I think that'll be good enough for the Mets with that rotation to make it. But the final thing, and I've seen it in a few places, is the San Diego Padres missing the playoffs. This team is very expensive, much like the New York Mets. It would be an utter failure if they missed the playoffs. Fernando Tatis is one of the most electric players in baseball. He's coming off his suspension 20 games into the year. Manny Machado is coming off arguably his best season of his career. Xander Bogaerts is brought in to be the starting shortstop and add a solid bat to the middle of that lineup, a guy that can get on base. Trent Grisham, Juan Soto in the outfield, who I'm expecting to bounce back in a big way. The Padres aren't missing the playoffs. And yes, the NL playoff picture looks eerily similar to how it did last year, but I do have the wild card order slightly different. I know you are going to be mad that your favorite team is not in my playoff picture, but my favorite team is not in my playoff picture. Moving on down to second base, I'm a team first guy. But when it comes to baseball, a lot of people are judged on the individual awards, especially for their legacy. Paul Goldschmidt winning the MVP last year in the fashion he did made him go from a perennial all-star to a guy who legitimately might make the Hall of Fame one day. And there's a guy in the American League that I think is eerily similar to that, and that's Jose Ramirez. Jose Ramirez, one of the best unkept secrets in Major League Baseball. A guy who drove in 126 runs last year, which was the highest percentage of a team's runs driven in by one player in baseball. He carries that team, and as those young players get better, he will continue to drive them in. He is a shoo-in for 120 RBIs with a chance to go for 140, 150 as that team continues to grow. Jose Ramirez getting your MVP after 5 of the last 6 years, finishing third, second, sixth, and fourth. You're going to get your MVP. Shohei Ohtani is going to go off. Do not get me wrong. He should be the favorite to win the MVP in a contract year, coming off an amazing World Baseball Classic. But what it showed me last year is the writers are willing to vote against Shohei Ohtani if there's a good enough storyline. And I think Jose Ramirez has a legit chance to push for the Triple Crown in 2023. In the NL, there's a lot of good names. But as this continues to look more like a war award, I have to go with the guy that I think is going to be the biggest difference to his team in the National League. And that is Mookie Betts. Mookie Betts last year hit 35 home runs. It was the first time he went over 30 since his MVP season in 2018 in Boston. Mookie Betts is one of the best all-around players in today's game, and I don't think he gets enough respect. When he wins the MVP this year, he will only be the second player in history to win the MVP in both the American League and the National League. Frank Robinson was the first and only player to do so. Mookie Betts will be punching his ticket to Cooperstown with an MVP this season. The Cy Young Award in the American League will go to the guy that I think will be the true ace of the Houston Astros. That's Framber Valdez. Valdez showed in the playoffs last year that he's not scared of the big moment. He can pitch in big games, has an amazing sinker, and a lot of speed behind his fastball. Framber Valdez, I think, has a chip on his shoulder going into this season because they're making such a big deal about Justin Verlander's departure. Verlander, even coming off of Cy Young, is a lot older than Framber Valdez. And I think Framber Valdez is going to show what a prime pitcher as an ace of one of the best teams in baseball can really do in 2023. The NL side, there's a guy that got disrespected during contract negotiations in spring training, and that's Corbin Burnes, former Cy Young winner from the Milwaukee Brewers. Corbin Burnes has elite stuff. And as a guy that's had these contract disputes, is trying to hit the open market, I expect him to put up a monster year. I expect him to help carry the Brewers into contention, and I expect the Brewers to finish better than they did last year because of him. Corbin Burnes, National League Cy Young. Rookie of the Year for the American League, I went outside the box. I didn't pick one of my Red Sox guys. I think Yoshida is going to be very good. I think Tristan Casas will have a fantastic career. I didn't go with Anthony Volpe, who I think will be a spark plug in the Yankees offense. And I didn't go with the favorite, Gunnar Henderson. All the tools in Baltimore, but I expect Baltimore to regress a little bit in 2023 despite their improvement in 2022. I'm going with Josh Young from the Texas Rangers as the American League Rookie of the Year. He has a lot of power, and I expect him to have a 30 home run season in this Texas Rangers offense. I'm not expecting any of those guys that I listed that are favored ahead of him to have gaudy power stats. They might have good power stats, but not quite as gaudy as 30 home runs, 100 plus RBIs. And I think helping a team like Texas get back to the playoffs with that kind of power, that's an AL Rookie of the Year. NL Rookie of the Year, you saw him in the thumbnail. Jordan Walker. St. Louis Cardinals are a great organization. I expect Jordan Walker, who's 6'5", 225. I expect him to make a lot of noise in the big leagues, both as a DH and in the outfield. He can move very well for his size. His hands are massive. He can palm probably 2 baseballs. And I expect him to put up those gaudy power numbers that you look at for a Rookie of the Year. Somewhere in the 25-30 home run range if he plays the full season. Jordan Walker, National League Rookie of the Year. Manager of the Year, pretty easy. Bruce Bochy in the AL. If the Rangers are as good as I'm saying, where they make a wild card spot and Josh Young is Rookie of the Year, Bruce Bochy coming out of retirement and taking the Rangers there, it would easily be Manager of the Year material. On the NL side, I have to go with Craig Counsell. I think the Brewers are going to be in it till the very bitter end. And I think a lot of that's going to be because of Craig Counsell. They've made some really nice improvements, one that I will get to shortly. And I think they're going to be very competitive. They were lingering way behind the Cardinals last year, and I expect them to, much like the Twins and White Sox last year, be pushing for their division title as their only chance to make the playoffs. The comeback player of the year. This is where I have my bias. And I think Chris Sale is motivated as ever to remind everybody who he is. A lot of people were upset that the Red Sox decided not to start Chris Sale today on opening day, which is his birthday. However, I think that the fact that they were willing to do that, make him wait another day so he could get the proper rest and stretches in, shows that they're going to keep him healthy as they can this year. And a half-healthy Chris Sale is going to rack up a lot of strikeouts and is going to be an amazing pitcher. National League Most Improved Player, Comeback Player of the Year. It's going to be Jesse Winker for those Milwaukee Brewers. Yes, I have them racking up the awards. And I think they're going to be a surprise story in baseball. I would not be shocked if they end up taking a wild card spot away from one of these multi-billion-dollar teams like the Padres or the Mets. Jesse Winker last year was expected to be the big asset in that Mariners trade with the Reds. Instead, Eugenio Suarez, who was just a contract dump, had an amazing season, and Jesse Winker struggled. I expect Winker in that Brewers uniform, playing in the corner outfield against those NL Central teams that he mashed against when he was with the Reds, to have an amazing season, batting close to 300 with 20-plus bombs and winning the NL Comeback Player of the Year. As we move towards third base, it's the throwback third base, talking about a moment in baseball history that happens to fall on the date of the show. March 30th, 1966, Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale ended their holdout and signed for $130,000 and $105,000 apiece. This was the highest paid player at the time in Sandy Koufax at $130,000 for a season. And both him and Drysdale were the only pitchers in baseball at the time with contracts over $100,000. Now, they were coming off a World Series win in 1965. And These pitchers wanted their money. They first demanded over $1 million between the two of them. Instead, had to settle for this. But I wanted to highlight why this story was so important. Major League Baseball was not collectively bargained at the time. These players were kind of stuck with the teams that signed them unless they traded them away in a deal that worked out for both teams, not for the players. Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale both had meetings with the Dodgers front office. And in their first meetings, they were both given, well, why would I pay you X when Sandy is willing to take this amount? Why would I pay you X when Don is willing to take this amount? Little did the Dodgers know, these two star pitchers that were very good friends talked to each other about it and realized that the Dodgers were playing them against each other to get them for the cheapest possible cost. So Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale, they hold out of spring training in 66 until they get their money. And this forced baseball to lift into a collective bargaining agreement where players couldn't collude against owners to kind of leverage their salary. But what this ended up doing was this allowed owners not to be able to collude against the players, which had been happening for decades prior, where the owners had fully control of these players and they would say, hey, I wash your hand, you wash mine. I give you this guy, you give me so much money that I need for X, or this player that will really help my team. And they made deals like that. Players were property. Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale were a step towards Marvin Miller and Curt Flood really making the big splashes to move people around. And I think it's a story that is undertold in Major League Baseball. Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale is one of the best 1-2 punches baseball has ever seen in a starting rotation. Hall of Fame pitchers through and through. But this story is one of their biggest achievements that doesn't get any shine. So whenever you hear about the collective bargaining agreement, just know that Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale were a big part of the reason why the players have the power they do today. Circling home, we have our hot takes and our highlights. Obviously, my hot takes were about the Rangers and the Brewers during the show. But just in terms of the baseball season in general, I think that baseball is going to break records in both attendance and runs scored this season. And I think those two things will have to go hand in hand. I think with the new rules, there's going to be a lot more slapstick baseball, balls getting through the infield, guys stealing bases, getting extra bases, and just runs being scored. The pitch clock is going to speed up the game significantly. I've loved watching it during spring training. I believe that it's going to be great for baseball's future to get more young people into the game. This game is so fun to watch. And yeah, 27 outs is 27 outs. It can still happen as fast as it can happen. But the fact that we're not sitting there while you try to pick off a guy 10 times, or a pitcher fidgets for 2 minutes on the mound between pitches, or a batter steps out of the batting box 6 times to fix his jewelry or swing his bat around. Those kind of things that nobody really cares about are going to shorten the games and provide more fans with the opportunity to sit down and watch baseball. And that's what I'm really excited about. I hope that the World Baseball Classic and the viewership that was shown both in person, nationally, and online, that baseball sees that they need to get baseball not just nationally, but they need to get it out domestically. The TV contracts, Rob Manfred has said multiple times, are going to be worked on. The blackouts need to stop. there needs to be a way to watch the games. And I understand that these regional broadcasters and teams have been making a lot of money the other way around, but with the new collective bargaining agreement, with the media side of it, these teams are being compensated equally for the new TV deals. And I think that's a big game changer. It will cause more teams to be flexible to getting their product out there. And the more eyes that are on baseball, the greater it will be. I appreciate each and every one of you for checking out the Solo Shot Sports podcast here on YouTube. Please subscribe, like, share with a friend. You can follow me on Twitter at DominicMana44 and follow the page of the official podcast at Solo Shot Sports on Twitter. Hope you guys enjoy this beautiful season of baseball, and I will catch you guys next Solo Shot Saturday. Peace.